The punch in Doom Eternal sucks, we all know that. But for 5 years now, I've been arguing with people that complain about it, seeming to miss the point behind that design decision. So just like how I had to do videos on ammo limits, faltering, player elitism, the Marauder, and platforming, it's time to finally focus entirely on the melee of Doom Eternal. Yes, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel. I can't imagine anything else I could say about Doom Eternal at this point. Every time someone complains about the punch, they say it feels weak and useless, and that it doesn't make sense for Doom Guy's power. I'll address the second point first. Well, not really address it, I'll simply concede the point. Yes, it makes no sense in the world of Doom for the mighty Doomslayer's fist to be this weak. He's already been in the Divinity Machine at this point of the story, making him into a super being. He should be devastating anyone with a single punch. And this is after Doom 2016, where your melee did a decent amount of damage. Way more than it does in Doom Eternal. What happened? Is he just tired? In the world of Doom, it doesn't make any sense. I'm fully conceding that point, okay? But let's talk about the gameplay and how the melee being weak benefits the combat they designed. Eternal is a gameplay first experience, and if the melee sucks, then it sucks for a reason. First, a little history. If you go back to the original Doom, melee was a last resort. It was slow and clumsy. You never wanted to have to rely on it, because Doom was a game about guns, not punching. You weren't supposed to use anything weaker than your guns. I made this point back in my review of Doom Eternal in 2020. I really like the way the melee attack has been changed too. Your melee does next to nothing, so it's just not an option. You gotta use your guns, and that's very Doom. Wow, listen to the innocence and joy in that guy's voice. What happened to him? So we already have a legacy reason for melee being bad. Doom 1 and Doom 2 had bad melee. Doom 3 isn't exactly a game where you want to use melee either. It's just going to get you killed. And most importantly, there is no instant melee button. You have to switch to your fists in order to use them. You couldn't just swing melee in a panic, it was a dedicated decision to use it. But what happened in the decade between Doom 3 and Doom 2016? The rise of Call of Duty and Halo, and all the other shooters that had a quick melee option. It became the standard. At the moment, you could melee someone. These attacks were generally quite powerful, ranging from 3 hits needed to being an insta-kill in some cases. And just as Doom 2016 incorporated weapon upgrading from games at the time, it also incorporated instant melee. The Doomslayer, at the press of a button, would strike an enemy. While not strong enough to take on heavy demons, you could easily fend off lower demons with a couple swipes of the hand. Zombies go into Glory Kill with a single punch. Imps go into Glory Kill with only 3 punches. And while it takes a dozen punches to kill a Hellraiser, you'll notice that another thing that makes this punch really good is that it's also a guaranteed falter. Real quick, for those who don't know, falters are like pain states where an enemy flinches, but they actually stumble from it, and it interrupts anything they were doing. Doom Eternal gave us 2 different clear falter states. Hard falter is something that is guaranteed, like how a grenade will falter enemies no matter what. A soft falter is the same stumble animation, but it only happens if the enemy hasn't already been faltered. This prevents you from faltering an enemy endlessly with repeated shotgun blasts, or by detonating rockets over and over trying to stunlock. You can't do that against a big demon. It's a deep and interesting mechanic that determines part of the game's balance. I did a whole video on how it works. I think it's my best video. So, coming back to this Hellraiser in 2016, look at how every punch is a guaranteed falter. I can just bop him over and over and he can't do anything about it. This melee is a hard falter on lower demons, but higher demons like Hell Knights are not faltered. The damage is high enough to kinda dance around them after a combo and get the kill, but you won't be causing them to stumble. Now, in Doom Eternal, the base melee is a soft falter on lower demons. It will cause them to stumble 1 time, but after that, no more. And since it does dramatically less damage, there's nothing else to use it for after that. Melee can still be strategically used for that initial falter. If you suddenly find yourself in front of an imp or a gargoyle, you can panic press melee to falter and give yourself a second to reposition and get a shot off. So melee is not useless, you just have to know that it's a setup tool and not a mash option. I've seen this myself. I have sat friends down at the computer, people who play other modern shooters like Halo or COD or whatever, I get them to play Doom 2016, and when they get to this first fight outside, and they're still figuring out the movement, the range for the shotgun, the whole glory kill thing, it's all very new to them, they end up surrounded by enemies, and what's their gut reaction? What have they learned from the other shooters of the past decade when someone is suddenly in your face? Mash melee! Mash, 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 panic, oh my god! And in Doom 2016, that works. You don't learn anything from that. You don't learn not to find yourself in those situations. That's a bad situation to get yourself in, right? Well, it's not actually bad if the answer every time is just mash melee like an idiot. Taking away melee damage and the guaranteed falter was Doom Eternal's way of getting players to think about their positioning and play smart, especially since the action was ramped up so much that you can find yourself surrounded more often if you lose control. Because the new Doom games are designed in ways to get people out of their habits from other games. 2016 got people out of the habits of hiding behind cover, depending on regenerating health and constantly reloading. Eternal got them out of the habits of over-relying on a single gun of preference, and mashing melee in a panic situation. Hell, now that New Doom has been around long enough to establish its own habits, the Dark Ages is getting Doom players out of their habits of weapon swapping, double jumping, and dashing. They're always trying to get you out of your comfort zone, so you have to learn something new. But how else does the melee change benefit Doom Eternal? Well, the ammo economy is partially dependent on it. Since the game uses low ammo counts as a pressure point for weapon variety, the ability to easily melee kill lower demons would cause it to collapse. As it is now, you're using several assault rifle bullets or a shotgun shell to set up a glory kill, and those bullets add up in the starting levels. It makes you see the value of the chainsaw, so you start working it into the loop. And it makes the plasma rifle a welcome addition because it draws from a new ammo pool. If you could just run up to all the lower demons, of which there are many, and mash melee for a glory kill, these systems wouldn't be building on each other to create Doom Eternal's combat. It's the same reason they took out the infinite ammo pistol. You don't need something that powerful and free in a game with an emphasis on resource management. Interestingly, an overlooked feature of Doom Eternal is that the dash actually does a decent amount of damage. You'll see that it does actually repeatedly falter after the previous falter animation ends. You can dash after melee to double falter. 4 dashes will kill a zombie, so that's something else to consider, as small as it may be. And finally, the most obvious point is the addition of the Blood Punch. Yeah, the base melee is super weak, but by the second level you gain access to a massively powerful punch that does high damage, and pushes out a shockwave that hard falters everyone it touches. That's a guaranteed falter on any demon, even an Archvile, a Doom Hunter, or a Tyrant. And you get this Blood Punch by doing just 2 glory kills, which you're already naturally doing all the time to stay alive. You should be using this Blood Punch regularly because you always have it. You have a devastatingly strong melee. So that's my defense of Doom Eternal's melee. Yes, the base melee isn't nearly as strong as it was in 2016, but I think it's a very narrow viewpoint to look at it and just complain that the melee is a downgrade. That ignores all context and the game Doom Eternal actually is. If they played exactly the same and the melee was just weaker, then I'd say you have a point complaining that melee is a downgrade. But they are differently balanced combat experiences with different options being emphasized, so you have to realize that. Thanks a lot for watching. This one was a lot of fun to talk about.